It was life-changing because we did something some adults can't do. And you can really just sit down in a circle table and just talk about your problems, or sit down on the floor in a circle saying how you feel about the problem.
Even if we had like this huge like moment where we were like at the lowest point of arguing, and the circle could maybe help us bring us back to being at least okay with each other and not feeling that tension in the room.
So I first heard about the circle with Chantal and Genesee from my coworker Jose, and so I met with those students, and it turned out I'd actually worked with all of them before, so it was pretty easy to kind of convince them to do a circle, and so it was actually our first cross-campus collaboration. But later that day I got an email from administration saying that one of the parents wanted to involve police in the situation because there were threats being made, people were worried about their safety, and that's when I knew that we should really intervene and try and use a circle. I think that for young people, using a circle is a much more powerful way for them to resolve their conflicts because they get to do it by themselves rather than having adults kind of intervene and tell them what needs to happen for safety purposes. Palante uses circle practice as a way to address violence and conflict and harm in our communities. We learned this practice from our teacher, Dr. Saira Pinto, as well as Jose Lugo and our friend Noham.
I think Palante is a model when it comes to the enactment of circles in schools in partnership with communities, and I think that people should pay attention to some core principles there. In the West, you would say that Palante is coming from three very distinct lineages. One is circles, as in the lineage of the circles via the Yukon territories, the Tlingit Nation. The second one is youth development as a core set of practices, and the third one is organizing as a core set of ways in which you engage community. From an Indigenous perspective, those three things are not separate. In circles and in terms of this connection to indigeneity, everybody matters and everybody has a right to thrive, which is fundamentally what youth development is about. Palante made some really good decisions around enactment of partnership between community and school. And so most of the people, the adults involved with Palante are community members. The integration of a race and power lens into the practice of circle as a way to stand in right relationship to the practice has been critical in the way in which this organization has developed. The centering of young people as the core protagonists of the processes towards restoring a sense of well-being and enacting belonging in community is a fundamental principle. Young people leading, actually training, actually holding circles with their communities outside of the school walls, in the school walls, is a profound and needed reminder of the purpose of the sharing of the circles in the first place.
In this age of kind of social media is really becoming far more the norm for how people communicate with one another, I think that there's also very much a need to teach students live, person-to-person communication skills, and and those communication skills are also, very much at the heart of, conflict resolution and conflict prevention. So, where I think that a lot of folks would assume that Palante is, as restorative justice is really a kind of a violence prevention program, it's much more than that. It's much more of a kind of communication skills program. It is a program where young people get a chance to learn who they are in relationship with others.
The idea with the circle then is to get both participants in that violence to come through and sit in a circle and be able to be heard as to what happened from their view, why it happened, and then listen to the person that they affected or the people they affected. We try to remove as much as possible the authoritative relationships that exist between adults and children or youth, so that we're able to get and see one another as equal people and return to balance and get the individuals involved to re-enter the community in a healthy, safe way. It is, again, about balance.
So from my experience, I have a little bit of cross-tribal situation in my family. And so, early on, it, became clear to me that different nations do things differently, but we have common ground. And so, but it's clear though. Rotilon Soni, or Haudenosaunee, Iroquoian people, we have our system set up that where we try to balance our power. So the clan mothers get together and they together choose the clan fathers who are going to be chiefs in council and represent them, and they charge them with the issues and the voice of their clan. And in that system, there are 6 nations. There are 5, and then there are 6, and they have a set number of representatives who represent the clans, and they sit in a set way, and they have a set order. And all of this is done to preserve a structure that will keep our great law going, our great law of peace going, Sagoa. And that's what that structure is there for. It's to keep that balance. It's to keep that great law alive. The fear is that without that structure, people will devolve into all of their bad habits. But of course, it only works if you bring your best self to circle and you remember its sacredness. Because the sacredness will help you be your best self. And if you remember that your ancestors and the spirits are there to support you, you can be your strong self. And those 2 things will make the circle go right. In the traditional way, the indigenous way, there are many ways to express this in detail, but we all have a structure so that everybody gets a voice, everybody's represented. And there's no coercion. Nobody can really compel anybody else to do anything, but there's definite clear invitation.
Circle practice has been used for thousands of years by Indigenous nations all over the globe. It's so much more than just a conflict mediation tool. In fact, it's a whole system of governance. It's the way that we practice being in right relationship with ourselves, with others, and the world around us. As part of colonization, the United States government tried to take circle practice away from Indigenous people. It was outlawed until 1978 when the Native American Religious Freedom Act was passed, and it was only until then that circle practice could be done freely.
And so in the U.S. context, for example, after the first Wounded Knee in the 1890s, Indigenous religious practices and enactments of community were outlawed until about 1978. And so throughout the entire time of the, early to mid 1900s, the circle practice was actually not allowed, and was still anyway maintained and in so many ways shared. And so you have iterations of circle practice that show up in things like the Boy Scouts and some methodologies around facilitation and conflict resolution, but they don't really show up on the screen as a full practice until the 1980s. Where they were actually used to engage Western folks and colonial settlers to actually try to figure out how to respond to harm and how to critique or bring a critique to the criminal justice system. And so the practice of circles is not a neutral thing. It comes, access to the process comes at a great price on behalf of Indigenous peoples, and a huge amount of generosity even in the sharing of it. It's important when you practice circles to be mindful of the fact that you're accessing a technique, a method, a practice that comes from a different worldview that is really trying to survive. Probably the longest historically the longest siege on a people that's ever happened in history, which is about 520 years ongoing. The first thing that needs to happen if folks are going to practice circles is they need to figure out how to be in right relationship with the Indigenous people from the land and on the land in which they're operating. Many folks have thought that that's an impossible or too hard an expectation or a request. And I'm just, I don't know how to respond to that critique other than to say that's just a lazy critique, as a lazy reaction to say that it's too hard an expectation or request. It's not too hard for Indigenous people to have to navigate Western ideas and culture and ways of doing power and privilege every day.
I think it's really significant for young people of color to learn this practice, particularly in this community where a lot of our young people are Puerto Rican or from other Latin American countries. A lot of us have Indigenous roots, and a lot of us have been disconnected from those through colonization. So I know for me it's been really powerful to reconnect to that part of myself, and I've seen the same happen for young people in the school system where it shines a light on our history and who we are and how we should proceed to be in the world, and it grounds our activism in the sense of deep connectedness with each other that I think a lot of our movements can sometimes be lacking. We get a lot of requests for people to be taught circle practice from us, and a lot of times people want the circle templates, or they want to know the step-by-step process. And the thing about circle is the only way to really learn it is to do it and to really practice it and to practice it often. With that being said, we can share with you the general flow of a circle, but the only way to really be able to do it is by doing it and by really learning it with your body.
So we start by sitting in a circle, and as you can see, we have our centerpiece in front of us. So the butterflies represent transformation, the 3 young children represent youth leadership, and the candle they're holding represents the fire of our community. The Young Lords newspaper that we have and the Black Panther book represents that we're part of a larger liberation movement.
So we always begin our circles with an opening, and it's a way to set the tone of the circle and to invite everybody in.
Next, we explain the talking piece. All of our talking pieces are sacred to our peer leaders. When you have the talking piece, you're invited to speak. When you do not have the talking piece, you're invited to listen.
The talking piece always moves to the left because that's the way energy flows in the northern hemisphere. Our teacher, Sarah, taught us that if you look at water going down the drain, it always moves to the left. Energy flows in the same way. The person who starts the round usually answers first. We usually start by doing a check-in round, where everybody in the circle gets a chance to speak about who they are, how they're feeling. We'll often ask something funny like, if you could pick any superpower, what would it be? We usually do this to bring humor into a circle. That way we break the ice and everybody feels calm and at ease, especially dealing with a conflict circle.
So we also do a round on values, and this is so people can tell us what they need to be their best, most authentic selves. And then we dive straight into the issue. So that's when people tell us what happened, how they were affected by what happened, what they can take responsibility for, what they need to move forward, and what we can do to offer support to them.
We always close the circle with a checkout round. This round is a way for the people in the circle to reflect on how it went for them. Following that, we have a closing quote that signals the end of the circle.
One way to really hold the integrity of it is to make sure that you're never forgetting your analysis of power. We need to be talking about racism, we need to be talking about colonization, we need to be talking about youth oppression. Those need to, restorative justice programs need to explicitly be working against those systems in their practice, or else they're just maintaining the very systems of domination and oppression that have created so much of the harm in our world.
Circles are about community. They're not about institutions, they're not about individuals holding circles. They're about community. And the enactment of circle is about the reflecting out into the world a set of values and principles of being in community that is profoundly not Western. And so in order to do circles with integrity as an institution, accountability has to rest in the hands of community. Training has to be targeted to communities. And institutions can be partners in that, but they cannot be in charge of that. If you're gonna do circle practice and gonna be in integrity around what the practice means where it comes from and who it's from, and the intention of the sharing of that, then I think it's really important that trainers of color circle people of color, that communities of color are at the heart of the implementation and the enactment of disciplinary processes in school, as well as alternative sentencing processes in prison, as well as other ways in which circles are being used to impact the way that organizations develop and operate in communities.
I think a lot of adults that work in schools want restorative justice to be this way of really fixing students. And so sometimes when there's students who have chronic behavioral issues, they hope that by doing a circle they can persuade the student to act differently. And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes students show up in circle and they are able to think really critically about how they behave in a situation, and they choose by themselves to change. But we're always really careful about that power dynamic between teachers and young people. And if a teacher in particular, or an administrator, or some adult in the building wants to have a circle with a young person, we're never going to put the young person in a situation if the adult isn't also willing to look critically at themselves. We believe that all conflict has multiple sides to it, and so we're really careful about that power dynamic, and about making sure that students are in a place where they can mend a relationship rather than be told what to do.
What keeps me focused in this process with integrity is to recognize that schools are a colonial institution, and that no matter what the intention is by an individual or a large group, once we enter into the system, we end up having to support all the processes and practices, even though we're going to push against them. We're going to say, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to push against them. I'm going to push against them. But this system is over 500 years old, and it's been used to colonize and erase my people. And so I don't trust this system, and that's why I won't become any further into the system as a participant of it. And so if I'm an educator and I'm sitting in the classroom and I want to keep this authentic, know that you're part of the problem. And know in order to be part of the solution to these problems, you have to accept that you're part of the problem. The next part is to know that you're going to make mistakes. And only thing that you can do is accept that and have people there to support you. So what that means, if you're running your first circle, and this is a very challenging subject for you, that you've reached out to people who you trust, who know this process, and you feel confident that they can step into the space with you and sit with you. Because the worst thing that an individual can do who's hosting a circle is to think that they know what they're doing when they don't. Run the circle and let people feel comfortable enough to become vulnerable and not know how to support them before the end of the circle. And sometimes what happens is people will get up and walk out more vulnerable when they came in, still open and exposed, and that can cause a lot of challenges for those young people.
The invitation to circle from an indigenous community to white institution and white agents of those institutions was an opportunity for the white people to find a way to be in relationship with others that is fundamentally respectful and honorable, and centering a relationship of love. And some of the white luminaries in the field actually turned the process into something about themselves. And that brings me a huge amount of grief, because that was an opportunity lost as a result of the strategic mind coming into play about how we're going to make this available in the world. The result of that has been that our own people are not home in those spaces. It's the use of circles as a weapon of control in schools, in prisons, in communities, against our own people. That is unconscionable, and that is not why the process was shared. So I want to make sure that record, to get the record straight, to invite folks into course correction. At no point should there be circles going on in the United States without deep consultation and practice with communities of color, with communities that are being impacted by institutions, that are saying that they're using circles because they're trying to change themselves.
I think Jose has said this in a good way. A lot of the times these problems you encounter, this is an opportunity to make progress. So if you go around and don't encounter any problems, you might not be making any progress. So it's good. It's good to let the problems come up. It's good to let them come out. And we're in this space together, so it's good to know that we're here together. and we're here to help each other. And when we're in this space together, we can overcome the problems that, you know, it's a safe place to be more honest. It's a safe place to be more real. And it's a safe place to tell the truth that you can't always tell. And let's let these problems come out into the sacred space where the ancestors and the spirits can help us with that. And we brought our best selves to this place. So this is the ideal time.
Honestly, I feel like in a circle, like, you feel heard. Like, I feel like the only reason why problems happen is because you aren't heard, or you just aren't heard the way you want to be heard. And in a circle, you can explain the way you feel or how you felt because of what happened.
I had never done a circle before. That was my first circle. Some people say it worked, but others said that it's just a waste of time. They say to fight, fight your problems, or if not, you're weak, or just like a coward or whatever.
What do you think made it work so well for your particular circle?
I think it's because we let everything out the way it is. Not trying to sugarcoat anything. Like, we just said it how it needed to be said.
I would definitely participate in a circle again because there was love in the circle. We were able to get past it and able to put our differences aside and understand each other more.